Happy Thursday to the people. It is Thursday, which feels weird to say, but it's March the 12th here in Winnipeg and on the 204 Comics YouTube channel. I come to you all solo today. Ashley is off in the land of doing Ashley stuff. He's very busy with the comic shop, and this week he asked me if it would be okay to fly solo in making this video for you, the people. I said, how could I not oblige? So, this week I'm here to talk to you all about the wonderful and wacky world of variant covers on comic books. This will probably be more informative for people who are new to comics, but hopefully the folks who are seasoned veterans see something that they might not be familiar with and learn something new as well. So let's just get right into it. If you're new to comic book collecting, you've probably heard the term variant cover. Most often what these are in the modern setting are the interior of the book is exactly the same as every other cover for that specific book, but the exterior, the front page generally in most cases, it's going to be different. Maybe it's a special artist, maybe it's done in a particular style, maybe it's what we call an homage or reference to something old, but variants are pretty standard on just about every book that releases these days. Typically, issue ones are going to receive, depending on the publisher and the issue, significance of that issue, they'll receive the most variant covers. Typically, it's not uncommon for a Batman #1 or Spider-Man #1 to get like 70 variant covers or something crazy like that, where, you know, issue 32 of like the ongoing whatever it is, the X-Men, let's just use an example, might only get 2 variant covers, and that's because there's something special happening in that issue. So those are kind of variants in the modern day. But in the past, way back before I was even born, and a lot of the youngsters who were just getting into comics were born, variants were more than just, you know, a special cover that was coming on a specific book. Sometimes they were just, I don't know, something like you bought it off a newsstand instead of buying it at a comic shop specifically. So I've got a whole pile of examples I'd like to show off for the newbies, for the guys just getting into comics, and we can chat a little bit about them as I go through them. It is after hours here at the shop today, so we'll try and blitz through this one so I'm not stuck here all night for you folks. But here we go. So this is a Web of Spider-Man 34. I'm sorry for the glare in advance, but this is just a standard, straightforward Web of Spider-Man issue. So you would go to a comic shop, you would buy this, it would have in the bottom corner here in the barcode box a black Spider-Man logo. These were most common, I would say, in the mid to late 80s where this was happening the most. But comics would get what's called a newsstand variant, so you would see this barcode here instead. Most often, if you bought the comic from like a drugstore or pharmacy, supermarket, places like that, they would get these what are called newsstand variants because they weren't comic stores. So they would be, I guess that's there for them to scan through a cash register or till maybe. I honestly don't know why. There's more to barcodes than just that, but that's more or less what a newsstand variant is. There is something called a Canadian newsstand variant or Canadian price variant. So I'll show you what one of those looks like. So up here in Canada, comic books would get printed with a different price on the cover. It occurs to me now that I don't have a great comparison, but I think this issue here, Masters of the Universe, it's got 95 cents here, and I think instead of this probably 75 that it would have had, and it also has a barcode down here. This is a Canadian price variant to this. Most of the people in the community refer to them as CPVs or Canadian price variants, but you can also see them referred to as Canadian Newsstand variants in some places. There's that book in particular, and this G.I. Joe book here. This is another fairly notable Canadian Newsstand edition or Canadian price variant. Finding this book in a CPV is very difficult. I think this one's probably a 65-cent cover price originally. I could be wrong on that. Apologies if so. But the Canadian version of that book in particular, that G.I. Joe for Snake Eyes, the silent issue, I think it is, very expensive because it's really quite hard to find a CPV of that book. We don't have nearly the population reading comic books that the United States does and did back in the let's say late 70s, mid 80s kind of vibe. So they basically would have ordered way more comics in the States. There's also a price difference here, so we would have typically 20 more cents or so on a cover price up here, and the books would be printed in smaller quantities. So certain books in excellent condition that are Canadian price variants are worth much more money. Newsstand editions, like the one I showed you earlier with the Web of Spider-Man there, those don't always add value to a comic book. Sometimes they will certainly add value if it's a key issue. If you're new and you don't know what a key is, it basically just means something of significance happens. The people will argue until they're blue in the face on what a key actually is and should be, but that's the gist of it. So for example, Secret Wars number 8, one of the first black suit Spider-Man costume covers. It's a very popular one. I'm sure you've probably seen it if you're in the hobby. That book by itself in the direct edition, where it's just got the Spider-Man face on it, I think it is, you know, it's worth whatever it's worth. The Newsstand edition was harder to find because, you know, in good shape at least, because they weren't ordered to comic stores. They were ordered to grocery stores and things of that nature. So they're worth a little bit more. But then the Canadian version is worth even more yet because there was less of them up here. And oftentimes, I think back in the day when publishers were sending up, distributors were sending up the comic books, they weren't always Canadians when we got them up here. We would do the manual conversion at the counter. Some stores nowadays convert still from whatever the price says to a Canadian currency. We personally don't do that at our shop. I'm sure Ashley could probably get on his soapbox and talk about why we don't do that, but it's just a service that every store handles differently, I suppose, when it comes to pricing out comics. But in any case, CPVs, newsstands don't always add value to a comic, but in a lot of cases where keys are concerned, they will. So another type of variant, more common back in the day, but I suppose you do see them once in a while now, is what we call subsequent printings, let's just call them here. So in this example, we've got Superman number 75. This is the famous Death of Superman, probably one of the most commonly printed comic books of all time. You'll note here, this is the second printing. So you can see this little 2, Roman numeral 2 right there. This book, I think, went to like 3rd and 4th, maybe beyond printings. It's important to note that the publishers of these books don't always denote the printing on the cover like this. DC just did it for this one, and in that era, they would put the Roman numerals where subsequent printings were concerned. But Marvel handled things a little bit differently. So around kind of that same era, you've got here, better to show the A cover first. This is just an X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, I think 248. This is the same book, but it is a second printing, and they chose to just turn the cover gold. They did this a few times, I want to say, with a couple other notable keys in this one. If you have a bunch of 2nd, 3rd, 4th prints of books at home, and you're wondering if they have value, Well, it depends on the book. I would say in most cases, in my experience, it's not super common that they add a tremendous amount of value. In fact, most of the time, they reduce the value of a comic book by having a second, third, and so on. But in the case of something that's exceedingly rare, let's say they only printed 2,000 copies of a fourth print, that might add some value. Additionally, sometimes the only attainable copy of a book, because the first prints are so scarce, is a second print, sorry. So I think once upon a time we showed off some Ninja Turtles books. Ninja Turtle stuff is very notorious for, you can't find first printings of it. And if you do, it's like you got to sell your house to afford them, basically. So that's kind of second, third prints. There's other ways they show it off. Marvel used to kind of do different colorings of Spider-Man's head on the logo there. DC sometimes, like in the case of The Dark Knight Returns, the Frank Miller book, I think on the inside cover they would put like second print if it was the Carrie Kelly one, the first female Robin. There's lots of different ways that they'll show you if something is a second and third print, but they don't always happen. It's only in very select cases that a book will get additional printings or subsequent printings. Most commonly and probably most notoriously, Dork #1 from a couple weeks ago there. That book I think is on its fourth printing now or something like that. A few years back yet, there was the Transformers stuff that came out. I think Transformers #1, the Image, when they acquired the license and started pumping that out through Skybound, I think it went out up to 10 printings or something astronomical. So yeah, it's definitely a thing that happens. What else can we talk about? So let's touch base on Whitman. This is a little bit of a knowledge gap for me, but the way I understand it is that back in the mid to late 70s, early 80s, in and around 1980, there was a company called Whitman, which, the way it's been told to me, was they helped distribute comic books from one area of Canada and the United States to the other. I think it was everything out west. They helped distribute books out there. And as part of that process, if I'm not mistaken, they would end up putting their logo on a lot of comic books. Oftentimes, these would be comics that were based on Disney properties or cartoons that you grew up with, and love if you're around my age or older yet. So a good example here is we've got here this Walt Disney Uncle Scrooge. I want to say this is 179. Yep. And this is just a famous cover, as I understand it. So it carries a lot more value. We have this one priced at $5.25. It's just a hard to find Whitman variant of that. The normal one doesn't have the Whitman logo on the top corner. Another expensive and notable one is the Black Hole #4. Ooh, let's see if we can't get that to show a little bit. Same thing, another one, $5.25 in Canadian dollars for that one. There's very few Whitman books that carry a lot of value. There's one, probably the most notorious one, or at least that I'm familiar with, the most valuable, is the DC Comics Presents 22, I think that is. And we have this one at $15.75 Canada dollars, as they say. So this book in particular, you'll note that the Whitman logo for that company is up in the top corner there. If you don't have the Whitman version, this is like a $3 book. Same with the Black Hole and the Uncle Scrooge there as well, I believe. They're not very expensive. The reason being that there's versions of them that are out there, attainable, easy to find. I will say that Whitman's, they're elusive for the most part, and it's one of those things that if you don't know that you have a Whitman copy of the DC Comics 22, it's one of those moments where you kind of oh my gosh, I found a book that's worth a bunch of money that I just thought was a nothing book. So look through your stuff for expensive Whitman variants if you're collecting or just starting to collect, or maybe you bought a collection, whatever it is. Don't forget about Whitmans, because they are tough to find and a lot of people forget about them. I should actually say as well about Whitmans, they, I believe they oftentimes pre-packaged books as well into like 3 or 4 packs. So you'd go to the grocery store and you'd pull out like this would be in like a big poly bag kind of thing, and it would say like Star Wars issues 1 to 3. On that note in specific, Star Wars numbers 1, 2, and 3 were pre-packed together by Whitman, and the first printings I think that they did of those books, or bundlings, or whatever you want to call it, they actually had, if you note here, like they have crossed out the barcode on the Whitman variant of DC Comics Presents 22. A lot of the Whitmans have blank barcodes, or they'll have they'll have the price box here will actually be a diamond shape on a lot of the Marvel books in particular, and those I suppose are to denote that they were part of this pre-pack. If you can find the Star Wars Whitman comics with a Whitman logo and a barcode that's present, those are, I believe, the issue 1 in particular is worth quite a lot of money. Not like the DC Comics 22, but still an expensive book nevertheless. Moving on, let's talk about facsimiles. So facsimiles are kind of a necessary evil in comic books, I would say. That's maybe the wrong word to put it even, but a facsimile is essentially, if you don't know, a reprinting of a book meant to preserve the way that it was originally done, so to speak, or meant to kind of mimic the way it was originally done. So here's an example. This is a Batman Detective Comics here. This is Detective 472, I want to say. 475, apologies. This book is a famous cover. He's got the Joker fish on him right here, so you can see he's got these 2 fish. He's holding them like guns. We have another one here. I think this is the first appearance of Brainiac, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that. And of course, one of the most famous facsimiles, let's say, that always makes people's hearts skip a beat is seeing an Action Comics 1 facsimile. This is not the other one. There's another facsimile that's a little older, I think, than this one. This is the 50-year, sorry, it's on this side, 50-year facsimile. There's another Action 1 facsimile that's done on like old newsprint, and it like always fools people that they think they have a legitimate Action Comics 1. Anyway, if you go and look in a facsimile, typically the ads and such are preserved from the time it was originally printed too. So these are kind of a neat time capsule, so to speak. Personally, though, if you came here and asked me what my thoughts are on facsimiles, I would tell you I don't like them that much. And the reason is oftentimes we're taking a book like this particular book here, like Action 242, right? This book is quite old. And when it was printed originally, the paper and the way that the colors sat on the paper and the inking and everything, it gave the book so much texture. And what's happening these days, and what I see quite often in modern printings of old books, is they're kind of like, I don't know if it's a filter or I don't know what it is, but the way that they print them, it doesn't look right. The colors look kind of, they just look strange, and I hate how it looks. It's like the newsprint of a lot of these old books gave the book so much more texture and life, and modern printings somehow manage to mess that up quite frequently. So it's better than spending. Like if you were to look for like this book, this is probably like a $50 to $100 book most commonly, at least up here. And, you know, you can buy this for $4 cover price. I think this one just came out this week as well. So facsimiles are great in a pinch. If you're trying to hold a spot in your collection, you say, oh, I'll just go buy the $4 version instead of spending the $50 to $100 or beyond dollars. Typically, the more expensive the book is, the more forgiving we are of its modern reprintings failings, let's say. Moving on here, we have, and this is kind of what I was talking about earlier with modern variant covers. So this is a, you know, this is the A cover, the main cover of Ultimate Spider-Man number 24. So this cover here is just what it came as. This is what a lot of people just call this the A cover, the main cover. And I can't tell you what cover number or letter this is, but this is just what we call an open order variant. So these are not special in any particular way. They're not limited. There's no manufactured scarcity on open order variants. It's just when you sign up for the book on your pull list, you can choose which cover you might want, and that's one of the ones you could choose with no real reservations or requirements. Unlike what we call incentive or ratio variants. So here's an example of this, Void Rivals 24. I think this is either a 1 in 10 or 1 in 25 ratio, meaning for a comic book store to get one of these particular covers here, this is not the main cover, this is again the ratio variant. To get this one, our store had to had to order 10 copies of this book just to get one of these in stock. So most commonly, comic stores will price up these a little bit. The way we typically do things here with an incentive or a ratio is like, if it's, you know, a 1 in 25, we'll charge you 2.5 times the cover price. 1 in 50 would be 5 times, etc., etc. As far as resale value goes on the secondary market, these ratio variants are kind of hit and miss. Oftentimes, it's where you'll see the big wins when people are like reselling. They'll talk about these like, oh, I've got this variant and I sold it for $400. Yeah, but like 90% of the variants that people buy are not really worth that much more than the A cover. So if you're going to chase variants for resale purposes, ratios are probably the way to do it. Here's another one. This is a Deadpool Batman, the Marvel and DC crossover that happened, I think, last year. This is a 1 and 200 ratio variant. It's a Capullo sketch cover. So we had this priced at $250. Now, what's important to note, if you are a person who collects ratio variants, books that are printed quite heavily, such as a crossover that hasn't been done in 20 years for Marvel and DC, there's going to be a lot of these on the market. So if this was like an obscure, like if Invincible #1 had a 1 in 200 variant that there was only 10 of in the world, I'm sure it would be worth like $30,000. But this is a $250 book because there's so many of these printed. So you got to think, if you're chasing this kind of stuff and you're a speculator and a FOMO person, keep an eye on gauging how many copies of a book are going to be printed, because that'll help you out quite a lot. The last couple things we'll talk about here, since we're already at like the 20 some odd minute mark, we could talk about exclusives. So this is another kind of, I don't want to say pitfall, but it's a bit of a gotcha moment with newer collectors especially. Some stores can basically enter a partnership agreement, as I understand it, with an artist, and that artist might be able, if they order enough copies of something, they can draw up a special cover for a book that's coming out. Typically, these are artists that must have some sort of existing relationship with like Marvel or DC or whoever it is. And you know, you get a cover that's just got some sort of special imagery on it. In some cases, in this particular example I have here, I think this is like a Archie Comics or a Betty and Me comic. But we actually had an artist reach out to us and ask if she could design us a cover that had our storefront on it. So if you're standing outside of the shop in the daytime, it looks quite like this. And this, maybe we could call this Ashley's little cameo for the video today, because it appears that he's on this cover of this one too. At least that's what we're telling people. I want to say that's a Brianna June, I think is her name, did that variant. And you know, these exclusives, most of the time, you as someone who's buying comics, you can't really get them in like a shop unless someone traded their collection in or whatever it is. Most of the time, you actually have to go to the artist's website to buy an exclusive, or there's some sort of event happening, whatever it is, a convention, yada yada. That's where you can get these exclusives. So they are tough to come by and have limited quantity, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're worth $1,000 every time. So keep that in mind. Typically, I would say the more popular the artist, the more resale value that the exclusive variant would have. However, something's only worth what people will pay for it anyway. Last couple things, I probably said that once already. Blank variants are a thing as well. Sometimes these are called maybe like a sketch cover or something, or a blank sketch cover. But we can see here, this is a Batman Dark Knight Returns blank cover. So this is just purely white. There's a few other variations of books. I've seen green ones, I've seen black ones. These are meant for you to get someone to sketch basically their own one-of-one cover. A lot of people buy these. Usually you can get them for $5 or $10, take them to a convention, get your favorite artist to draw you a Batman or something on them, right? You see a lot of really cool stuff online, and I think that a lot of the artists who do convention circuits and things quite like doing these, from what I understand. Next, we'll talk about the last two things I have here for examples. Foil, retro editions, like gimmick covers, I call these. Oftentimes stuff in poly bags, things of that nature. This is a good example of some, I want to say, 90s maybe, or very late 80s gimmick. So this is a foil version of Punisher, number 100. Does it carry any value? No, but it's shiny, so it tricks people into buying them. I think this is maybe a $3 to $5 book, but you know, the value is really not important. It's just, this is commonplace in the 90s, and I think we had a viewer recently ask about, you know, maybe we should talk about some of the stuff that led to the comics crash in the 90s. Putting tons of variants for a book, or having too many of these on just about every book, foil covers and things of that nature, was a big part of that equation, among other things for certain. But these foil variants, you know, this is the A cover looks nothing like this, so it's funny to kind of see. And also, I don't know what the deal is with how this is designed. It kind of looks like John Romita Jr. did the Punisher's face on this one. He does look like a Romita drawing. If you have the chance to look up a better non-reflective version of this, and you're a Romita Jr. fan, let me know if it was him. I couldn't find out. Last thing here, I'll call these like sub-niche covers. Oftentimes a series of covers will be made and kind of all connected to each other in some degree. The connecting covers, I should have talked about those too. So this is called the hip hop variant. So this here, it's kind of tough to make out. There's a lot of glare on this, a reflection, sorry. But you have the Punisher here. He's got his hands with some brass knuckles there. This is a reference to LL Cool J's, what does this say? Mama Said Knock You Out album cover. So it says at the bottom here, Castle said wipe them out. I don't know if that's going to come through very well here, but there's a ton of these hip-hop essentially homage covers where, you know, the artists drew the cover of the comic to look like a popular hip-hop album. There's tons of them. There's X23, like who is that? I want to say like DMX or something. I think the album's called Blood of My Blood. There's, I think there's Eminem homage. There's 50 Cent homage. There's tons of them. And the hip hop variants are like a sub niche of variant covers that have value because people are trying to collect them all. There's other types of covers or variants, like negative space stuff. Sometimes, like Chip Zdarsky, I don't know if we call him friend of the store, but he's definitely been here before and did a signing in the store. But Chip has done a few stuff for the comic Sex Criminals. There's like a Canadian version of that, and you know, there's all sorts of just like little weird covers in sub niches that people will just start collecting. And then, in fact, there's even sub niches of covers that aren't variants that people will collect. I think I might have talked about it before, but a good example would be like, like negative space, covers with snakes, covers with robots. Famously, many people collect what are called bondage covers. There's tons of different variations and things that would get people to collect these things, but not always are they necessarily variants. I have done just about enough yapping for today. So much so that I lost my breath a couple of times here. So I apologize if you hear me gasping for air, but I am just so passionate about the topic and I forget to breathe sometimes when I'm talking to you all. That's how excited I am about comic books. That's it for this week. Next week, I'll get Ashley to do something or other, but we were quite busy again, so he sent his best, and we hope you folks have a lovely week. If you've got a moment, please let us know what kind of variant covers you collect. I really like video game homage stuff. They just came out with a really cool Mega Man X one that I think I might have shown in the video. I collect stuff that refers to Punch Out on the regular Nintendo. That's another fun one too. There's all sorts of variants that I don't even know about yet, but I would love to know. So please let me know more and feel free to correct me. That's the only way I can learn sometimes about some of this stuff. It's so obscure, so niche. So much of this knowledge exists in silos, like that Whitman Star Wars with barcode stuff I was talking about. I had to go to the depths of Facebook to find out information about that, like actual guys that were buying them at the time, not what Key Collector says. It's a whole thing. Anyway, that's it for this week. Love you all. If you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing. We appreciate the support and look forward to talking to you all next week. See you guys later. Toodaloo.